Is this thing on? All right, so integrated client versioning is designed specifically for Framework Manager and Transformer projects. Certainly can be used with other files, but it's designed for those. And we did something specific to make it work really well with those. Traditional traditional version control systems are file-based. So every file in the version control system is a separate artifact. You have to add each individual file, remove, check out each individual one. Each one gets a different version number. So if you think about a Framework Manager project, which is a folder that contains some subfolders, like a logs folder, a bunch of files in there. When you start, you only have like a CPF and a model.xml, and then you get a log file, and some other ones get created. So you've got these more and more files showing up, and maybe some notes. In a traditional file system, you have to remember to add those new files to source control. You've got to remember to check out all the ones that are going to be modified. You have to deal with the fact that each one of these files has a different version number, because they didn't all get created on day one. So what version is your model? Well, version 5 on the CPF, but 4 on the model.xml, and it's confusing. We took a different approach. We said, you know what? The project is actually a collection of files. So we don't want to deal with version control of the file system. We want to deal with it at a folder level. You got to tell us where the folder is. What is the folder that represents your project? When you check it out, we check out the whole folder. When you check it in, we check in the whole folder. The easiest way to visualize this from a technical point of view is imagine that checking it in is zipping up the folder, which means it gets all of the contents. We never look at a file. Zip up, we literally do. Zip up the folder, send it up, and shove that zip file in the database. And then when you want to check it out or sync down a version, we delete the folder, pull down the zip file, and extract it. If you think of it from that perspective, then you never have to consider about, are you going to get new files? What if I delete a file? What if I add a folder? We don't look at that. We zip it up. You just tell us what's the base folder to zip up. And theoretically, that folder should be the one that has the CPF file. But it doesn't mean you can't be clever or do other special things with it. So what we're going to start with is the client versioning application. And prior to that, you've set up the client access URL. The reason for this is we are going to be streaming zip files from the client to the server. We do not want to stream that zip file through the gateway, through the dispatcher, and eventually to the ICS server, where there be multiple points of failure on a 20 megabyte file being streamed. We want you to access Cognos through the gateway for the sake of logging on, obtaining a CAN passport, being an authenticated user. We want communication from the client to go directly to the IBC process. We don't do this in a browser because of the issue with the CAN passport cookie is not going to go to 2 different domains. Yeah. But when we own the code, such as in client versioning, we can absolutely authenticate you against a gateway and then communicate with a different address with the same CAN passport. So that's the technology under the covers. Don't ever have to explain that, but it's the reason for that. And the first mistake that people do is they're trying to connect to server, colon 9300, because that was the default. So you've updated that, and that's all you're going to do here. So this administration is not setting up the project, it's administering the security after it's been set up. The idea is you have multiple clients on multiple machines. Maybe they're on the same machine because we installed Framework Manager on one machine, but they're going to RDP in different sessions, and they're going to work in different folders. So let's have a look and see what it's going to look like. First thing we're going to need is a root folder where we're going to do our work. So I'm going to create a new work, and I'm going to call this ADWFM. That's just my root folder. And find some models that we can work with. So in IBM Cognos, under FM, here's a bunch of models. So let's grab these. So we're just starting off creating a new environment, and we got to treat it as this is the step that the administrator is setting this up. We're going to see some of the permissions in a few minutes. I've got some samples, right? And samples would be things like those sales and retailers and the audit package. I've got some other things which are kind of BSP related, so we'll call those BSP projects. We'll put MetaManager, Security Auditor, and CS Documenter in there. and we've got this project, this kind of alpha project, which is this kind of skunkworks thing. We've got a few consultants working on offshore. Nobody else really on our team knows anything about it. But we're going to stick that in that alpha project folder. Okay, so we built a little bit of a hierarchy. Now these are not Framework Manager projects. This is just a folder. Inside this folder are folders that we're going to call project folders. Now I've developed that in my location on my machine. I'm going to connect up the client connector to that, and I'm going to get this stuff into the source control repository for the first time. So I'm going to create a new gateway. I'm going to call it dev development.cognos.com. So we go all the way out to cognos.cgi, and we're going to log in. We're logging into a single namespace as a user, and we always want to log in as that same user, because the idea is that this is going to connect to a folder on my client which represents my view, me being administrator. So I'm logging in administrator's view of these objects, and as the source control system is aware about what's checked out and what's checked in, or who has what, it wants me to, I'm logged in as administrator, and that's going to be reflecting the state of the stuff on my client. So I tell it my root folder, basically what is the root folder where everything underneath this is under source control. Directory is not empty. I am planning to add stuff, so I'm going to choose yes, otherwise no, to select an empty directory, just because it's unsure. Once I've connected to that root, there's a typo. I'll have to talk to Charlie about that. Now we've connected to a root, do you want to sync everything down? And most end users are going to see this and they're going to say yes, because most end users of the product don't do the stuff that I'm about to do. Let me clarify that. The administration of adding and deleting projects is also done from the client connector. So one of the users, or many of them, or all of them, have the ability to add and delete stuff from source control. The typical use in the client connector, the majority of the people will use it for checking in and checking out and syncing. But the adding of the projects also happens in the client connector. So you got to wear two different hats depending on what you're doing here. So I'm adding stuff. In here, I've got a number of context menu actions. A lot of these are securable. So we're going to see that security in just a minute. First thing we're going to do is add to source control. I've got to pick something underneath the root. If I don't, I'm going to get yelled at. When you pick something underneath the root, the thing you're picking is the project folder. If I pick alpha project, that's the thing that's going to get checked out and checked out, which means all of the things underneath it. If I pick BSP projects, I would be checking out all of this stuff. I don't want that. So I'm going to add ICS. Notice I'm not picking logs. Logs is part of the thing that gets checked out. That's the project folder. This is just for hierarchy. You can see that in our interface because yellow folders are part of our hierarchy, green folders are things that are checked out artifacts. So I got to go through this step, and yeah, it's a lot of click, 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 and do it over and over again. But you set this stuff up once, and then you never have to do it anymore. If you're quick, you'll see the folder is red and then it turns green, and that's because it's checked out, then checked in pretty quickly. I screwed up. I added the samples folder. And it also deleted it. That stupid product. Is this thing on? Alright, so what do we have in samples? We had Go Sales and Audit. We're going to talk about that in a second. Yep.
So if you've got something else behind the BSP projects there,
yes.
You don't need to click on the BSP projects there if you've got it.
Right, so I can click anywhere on here. If I click here, it just puts me onto that folder. Convenience.
Right.
It's a little bit quicker. But it doesn't mean I can't go down to here and pick another one.
Yeah.
So it just says, oh, you added it from there. So everything's going to be relative to the root. I can click on these folders just because it may be a deep hierarchy, and it's nice if you drop me in the right spot. Okay?
Yep.
Good time to talk about redundancies. We do not want to be responsible for deleting your framework manager models. Every time you check in a model, there's an opportunity that it didn't make it to the database, and your stuff gets blown away. Every time we delete something, there's an opportunity that that was a mistake. We have a backups folder. Okay, and if you come to this backups folder, so this is something that somebody might want to ask about or you want to reassure them, every time we check something in, we save a copy. This is the zip file that's getting sent to the server in its raw form before it goes through any encoding and going through a database. And if you come back and you say, I sunk down the project and all the Arabic characters turned to question marks, like, it's okay, you didn't lose your work, you have it. Go to the client that checked it in and go into the checked in archives folder. Likewise, you say, oh, I deleted a folder and it deleted on my disk and I didn't expect that. It's okay. Here's those things that got deleted before. Before we delete anything, we back it up. We always do that. So here's that entire samples directory that I got deleted. Okay, so that's good to talk about. All right, now we've set up this project. We have this in here. These are all versionable artifacts. We're on version 1 in our root. If I come back server side and I refresh this, the quickest way to do that is to right-click and hit refresh because these are all really iframes. If you hit this refresh, it takes a little longer. Refreshing the web page takes forever. So now we've got a project hierarchy. From an administrator's point of view, we can see who's got things locked out, and I can use this for renaming projects, which is not generally a good idea. Certainly if people have it checked out, or reorganizing projects, which is, again, moving things around is going to have an impact on a lot of clients. I'll give you the tools. But most importantly, what you got up here is permissions. So I can come to permissions, and if we come to the root, we can see system administrators, server, report administrators, and everyone gets full DOT access. That's kind of nice. I might want to make it so that everyone only gets read access. I'm going to leave it the way it is. I could also add other users, groups, and roles for Cognos or your local namespace. So we can add more entries on here and do that. Okay. If I come down another level, let's go into the alpha group and let's set permissions. This is inheriting security from the parent. I don't want to do that. Not for this one. I want to come into here and I'm going to go to my local namespace and I'm going to put the management team from BSP authors and I'm going to give them full vote. Just read and write access. I'm also going to add on system administrators. I think you actually need to have this on there and give system administrators full access. Now, the cool thing about this is that on the client, system administrator can add and delete these objects, but it's only the BSP managers that can see this. When I log on to somebody else, I don't even get this folder. It doesn't exist. So my offshore team is focused on this alpha project folder. The rest of the team sees these things. They don't even know this thing exists. So I can make different areas of our depot, our code depot here, available to different users so that they have the ability to add projects, source control, delete projects, which those two generally go one-on-one, but they don't have to. Read projects, which means they can sync them down and open them up in read-only mode. And write projects, which means they can check them back in. So there may be a use case, and there is a use case that some people should have the ability to get the project down and read it, see it, but they're not allowed to make changes. When you log in through the client connector, you log into Cognos. Cognos' security takes effect. You're a Cognos user, your groups enroll, and that's how we access security. It's another competitive advantage. This isn't a general purpose file system, not a general purpose version control system. It's against Cognos' security, integrated with Cognos' administration console, and piggybacking on Cognos' authentication and group enroll and memberships. That's really important there. Okay, any questions so far? And we'll talk more about the client connector itself. Okay, so the idea, forget about the server side. I am just some client, my name is administrator. I've got the client connector. and I know that maps to my ADWFM. So companies keep their framework manager models somewhere, and they may have it here on this remote desktop. It's a different way of thinking when you're in version control. Your framework manager models are not in this folder, they're in a database, that the version control system. So your framework manager models are stored in the repository. What you have done is sunk down a copy of them. They may be the latest version, they may not be, but you have sunk down a copy, and you may have the latest ones. This is your view of them. These are your copies of the framework management models, not anybody else's. Somebody else sets up a client connector, whether it's on the same machine because they're remoting or a different machine, and they set up a different route. If you go and set them up at the same route, or I'm checking out your I'm working in your folder, you're going to step on each other's toes. The idea is concurrent work. You can work on this project, and I can work on that project. You're checking it in. I have an old copy of yours. It doesn't matter. When I need a new copy, I can get it. So that this root folder is for this user using this client connector. They can use this now to check out the project. And when they check out that project, it's going to change the read-only flag. So a lot of version control systems, first to make sure that you have the latest copy down. A lot of version control systems, including ours, use the read-only flag to help indicate whether it's checked out or not. So you can see the attribute, there's no R in that column, which means it's not read-only. If I undo my checkout, which will revert my work and resync it, you'll see the read-only flag there. Okay. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I have the latest version and check out. Checking out does that. The read-only flag goes away. I'm going to add a new file in here, and I'm going to call it notes.txt. I come in here and say, this is some notes. Save it, close it. I don't bother going through Framework Manager when I demo this. I just don't see the point to, but maybe other users would. So I have my notes file, looks like that, and I'm done with my work. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check this in, and it's being checked in under my account in Cognos. I'm going to say, added some notes. So now what you'll see in the client connector is that we're on version 2, and there's the commentary. It's checked in, and the read-only flag is back. I can come in, I can sync down an old copy. I want to sync that version. You'll see notes went away. And I have version 1. There's actually a hidden file. Andy's showing hidden files. But this hidden file tells me what version I have local. Which means if I were to come over to here, you can see 1 has the asterisk. That's the version I have. And if I want to do something, check it out, it would yell at me, oh, you don't have the latest copy. You don't get the latest copy. Work on the latest stuff. You can also get the latest revision. And then we're in version 2. Our notes is back. That would be like any folder, any changes, anything deleted, any added. This file that essentially gets created. At this point, if somebody else had this checked out, I wouldn't be permitted to check it out, but I could certainly sync down to any specific version. On the context menu, you have the ability to get the latest revision. That went very quick because it went to each of these folders and realized, oh, you have the latest revision. It essentially did nothing. Or you can force sync. That's going to take a while because it's actually going to pull it down.
So just having that file.
Yes. So this goes in and looks at the version file and says, oh, you have the latest version. Check the server. Now it's calling the server because what happens if somebody checks in a copy? We think you have the latest version. At the time that we need to make sure you have the latest version, we make sure you have it. So I'll explain that. ICS, right now you have version 2. That's the latest version. Unbeknownst to you, somebody else just checked in a copy, and 3 is actually the latest version. So when you go to check this out, we actually call the server and say, what is the real latest version? Because I know you have the latest version as far as we know what you have, but what is the real latest version of the database? And it's 3, and we go, oh, you don't have it. There's more here than you noticed. In fact, every time you click on this, we call the server and you load that screen.
At that point, if somebody's got that checked out, and you've got version 2,
yeah.
and they've checked out version 2, and they haven't decided to check it out, you then say,
somebody else got checked out. So prior to trying the checkout, we're going to go get the real state. So sitting at this screen is not just going to update, right? If I come over here and I hit refresh, it would update. Refreshes the whole thing. And I would see you have it checked out. But if this was still green, you checked it out, and then I right-click and hit checkout, it goes and gets the current state. Says, do you have the latest copy? Is it checked out by anybody? Updates the state. This would turn red. It goes, you can't do that. Somebody else has it checked out. It would be beautiful to demonstrate 2 copies of this at the same time, but that's kind of difficult and gets really confusing in a demonstration, so you just got to kind of talk about it. I think that's pretty much it. Context menu actions, you can delete things, you can add to source control. Getting the latest revision or syncing, that's something you can do when you read. Checking out is something you need to do when you write. Check out and check in are both write actions.
So once you check that, just get the
Yep. Yep. If you come in here and you say Explore, that's going to pop it open in Windows Explorer. And if you right-click and you say Open, it's going to look for something associated with the CPF file. It's going to execute that. If your Framework Manager projects are associated with CPF files, it'll launch it open. So what I'm going to do is hit Open, and say, oh no, let me select the program. I'm going to find it. So, yep, it's not there. I'm going to go to Program Files. IBM, Cognos C10, bin, and then we'll find fm.exe. So now I've associated CPF files with fm.exe. Okay, it's open. Now, this is a nice way to show it because you don't have to open up Framework Manager. See, this is in read-only. This is all gray. It's actually kind of ugly. I don't like the way Cognos shows this in read-only mode. But it's in read-only, and I can look at this. Let me close that. Check out the project. Say OK. Open it again. Bam. And my password. Come in here. Go to the database layer. And make a description change on users. Copy that. Paste that. Go ahead and publish this package, which I'm not going to do right now, but I'll save it. Close out of here, check my work, and say I updated a description, and enter. It's in database. Now, we don't do any publishing. Server side, we don't publish things for you. You still have to do that from Framework Manager. So, I mean, at this point, if you forgot to do that, you could certainly just open it, publish it. I don't think you actually need to be, I don't know that you can't publish if it's set to read only. I think you can. Regardless, changes to the model is what we're concerned about version. A lot of tools in here that piggyback off of MetaManager. So some things in here apply to MetaManager. We haven't hidden them. If they don't apply, local backups, this applies to this product. Debug logging does. Comparison programs, some of the performance stuff. Doesn't necessarily apply to this product, but it does come over from MetaManager, which is a very stable and very well-built, solid application. So we're piggybacking on a good framework here. Good. Great. Anything else in here? Stop recording.